Good evening. You are listening live to the Two Extreme Horror Show. I am your host, Rob. My guest this evening on a post Halloween edition of a sequel. We have sequelitis for What Can We Say for Fright Night 2011 with Colin Farrell. My guest is, of course, the real Dr. V. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. And this is not a sequel, it is a reboot. That's all it
Sequel,
is.
reboot, I don't know what the hell to call it other than good, delicious fun. Yeah, so tonight I wanted to cover this movie because we recently covered the original Fright Night from 1985, and we had a lot of blasts with that, and we actually had a fair amount of people listen to the show and got some comments on it. And you know what? This is one of the few sequels, remakes that we really like it. And we have Dalton with us, the authenticator in channel. Good evening, sir. Enjoy the over the top remake. It is Dalton. I don't disagree. However, I will simply say that it's, especially by today's standards, passable. It's watchable. It's not full on extreme, and it certainly is not an original. But I like some of the twists that they had in this movie. So, for those that didn't know, to recap what the original Fright Night was about, it's a nice little hook. It's set up. It's about this kid. He's a teenager. He's at home, and he discovers that his next door neighbor is a legitimate vampire in today's world, and that's kind of the hook to it. So this reboot of Fright Night kind of is pretty much the same setup, but it's just more modernized. This time they're in Las Vegas. This time the women are a lot sexier, and they dress a lot more apropos as opposed to the Amanda Bierce asexual kind of look that was going on there in the 80s. And I got to tell you, this movie got some things right the original one didn't by specifically, excuse me, Vampire McLovin. You were talking about this off air. What do you have to say about Vampire McLovin there, Doctor?
Vampire McLovin. This kid is like, no matter what movie he's in, he's great. Yeah, he's one of those guys that plays. He's the same kind of role, the nerdy type, But this guy, he's like him playing Ed. This guy, just this character, I forget his name's Christopher something, but he just brings his A game to whenever any role he takes on.
Yes.
He was great in role models. He was great in this. He's great in like Super Bad. He's like him. He's a perfect cast for Ed. Just the way how excited he gets when he does a role and stuff. How much energy he brings to it. So seeing him, it was to me, it was like he's great as almost I'd say almost on par with the original Ed. The little Ed was more creepy. This one he's kind of like kind of like not as scary, but he's also kind of like crazy and more crazy in this one.
I think he's a more realistic nerd in the sense that the other one would just seem like a caricature, but here he seemed like in today's world it's okay mainstream wise if you're geeky, if you're nerdy, you're not so much of an outcast as you were before. And there's a great scene in here where he's arguing about his friend when they're looking for their other nerdy buddy in a house. And the guy's like, "Well, I'm sorry that I decided to grow up and have a life." And he's like, "Well, yeah, your girl used to make fun of her." And he's like, "Shut up, shut up." And she's a skank anyway, and all that. And he just mentions a couple things that you go, you know what? He's a nerd, but he's not that like cower in the corner, nerd that the dopey ass kid in the 80s version seemed like. So I thought he nailed the role and really added to it. But for me, I gotta say the best thing about this movie is honestly, it's Colin Farrell. This guy friggin' nailed it. I mentioned before about Jerry as your neighborhood vampire. It's not a good name at all, but I mentioned how he had an air of old world sophistication, of a bit of classiness to him, the way he dressed, the way he shook hands, the way he talked, and everything in the 1985 version. And I think Colin Farrell has a similar kind of take, but he's very animalistic in this, and he sniffs a lot. And there's just some
He
great scenes that he has in here, and his acting is off the charts in here, especially with not a lot of lines.
Colin Farrell, no matter he's always plays the heartthrobs. I mean, this is a perfect role for him because he's the heartthrob, but he's also the creepy serial killer heartthrob. Uh,
Yeah.
um, I mean, just I said it was a great cast for this. I mean, even have Anthony Elgin as Brewster, dude. I love how they added more drama. More. Ed had a bigger part in this movie than in the original one.
Yes.
Ed is upset because Charlie is kind of hanging out with the cool kids. He's got a girlfriend that likes him. Where Ed's kind of like the stay home nerd. He's all about vampires, comics and stuff, and he's basically, he's basically the opposite. What He's what Charlie used to be in the original movie, where Charlie is all he's all about Fright Night. He's all about like basically being a 14-year old, where his girlfriend want to get down and get busy. Here he's like, I want to get down.
Yeah,
he's
and he
like,
knows it. Well, this kind of
so,
has a
but
similar theme to that. What you're saying about that. Go ahead.
I love the fact that Charlie's he's got the old dirt bike, dude. And either and his girlfriend's teasing him. And he's like, when are you getting rid of this? Like, he's like, I love it. It's like it's something he feels like a man. He's able to work on something. He's not just gonna bum a ride from his girlfriend. It's embarrassing. You know.
I, I have to tell you though, in my opinion, watching this, I really didn't like his girlfriend character at all. She's cute and all that. I mean, what? That's fine, big deal. Um, there's a scene where early on, he's walking his motorcycle up. So to your point, it's supposedly showing him a little bit more masculine, more manly growing up. I think the inference is that he's about 17 or 18 in here, as a 11th or 12th grader, because they referenced being 16 when things were cool between them. But he's walking, and this neighbor chick comes out, and she's got the trash that she's taken out, which of course would never happen. No teenage girl would ever do that.
Yeah.
But she's sitting there, and she's got on her lucky shorts and everything, and she's like, oh, and they're talking for a second, and he's trying to be slick and all that, and he's not being bad at it. She's like, wow, you're getting big. See ya, Char Char. Giving him a pet name and all that. I'm like, that's the one I wanted to see him go after because his girlfriend is a bit of a tease in my opinion, but she's kind of like the Amanda Burst character where, uh, you know, she wants to do it at one point and he kind of rebuffs her because he sees something going on and everything. I just didn't get a good chemistry vibe between those two, and she of course had a much bigger role a little bit later at the end of the film, but the big sequence here to me is you find out everything really, really fast, kind of like the first movie, where his mom, of course, a single mom, so he has no dad, and his mom and his girlfriend are meeting the neighbor, which is Jerry, the vampire, and he's, looks like he's working on something in the ground or whatever, so he's got the wife beater on and all that. And these two ladies are so friggin' thirsty over this guy. It's embarrassing. And if I'm Charlie, I'm like, bro, that neighbor wants you. You might as well go tap that because your girlfriend's not giving you. Your mom's just drooling over the neighbor. And of course, the best acting about this scene isn't all this stuff or how it's realistic. Is how Colin Farrell basically recognizes the really nice special colored Air Jordan shoes that he's got on, and basically says, "Oh, you play ball? I do too. I'm always looking for a pickup game." He's very gracious in the way he tries to make friends without overdoing it, but he still has this very machismo, I'm the man vibe going on, and he really kind of nails it. However, for his character later on, we'll see that he doesn't actually do anything more sophisticated other than this
Uh,
particular interaction.
I like this Jerry better because of just Jerry who's actually going after his mom too. Not only is his girlfriend, he's like, and he was more able to fit in more than than the other one. The other one just seemed like he's like, I'm a vampire, yeah, blah blah. No, this one's got more energy to himself. He blends in with being human,
Yes.
or and he's cocky. He's like, dude, I can get your mother, I can get your girlfriend. You better give up. You know, you better back off. It's good for you. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
it's your mom's got the hot stream, man. I was like, I'll take advantage of that. It's like, and and it's like I love it. It's like because Anton Nelson, I loved him. And on Thomas, another great underrated film that most people that don't know about it. You know, but this movie here with Anton Yelchin, he's got the some like I'm still a nerd, but yet still kind of like cool enough to not be like out of the cool crowd and
Mhm.
into the cool crowd. He's not a douche. As I'm saying, he's more the average Joe. Um, and he's him also. You combine him with they get Mick Lovin. Those two together, like how their personalities clash, but you can also see how he still wants to be friends with his friend, but he also wants to be part of the cool clubs. But then the thing is like the only person that believes him that the Jerry guy is a vampire is McLovin. Like his girlfriend kind of looks at him like you're kind of crazy, you don't believe, you just you've been wrapped up in those movies. His mom kind of puts him in like, oh, you're just, what's your problem is, but Jerry's a nice guy. So I invited him over for dinner. It's like,
Mhm.
so I love the whole dynamic of this reboot versus the original. The original, don't get me wrong, the original had great music and a great theme. It had a great Charlie Brewster. but this one is like more. They modernized it more. They did more with it. What the original one couldn't do. They had a bigger budget for this one. They
Yes.
had freaking David Tennant in here. That also adds to it too. Him playing Peter Vincent. So uh, I gotta say, like for being a reboot, it wasn't bad. Because usually when people do reboots, it's they're horrible.
Yeah,
But
I
I
agree.
agree, but I can see Dalton's point of view. It's it's a little different than what you're used to. They could have done a little bit more. They could have done more with it, But for what they did, I thought it was fun enough.
Yeah, and I had mentioned before with the 85 version of Fright Night that I wish they would have explored some adult themes more, and I think they touch on them here a little bit more, which I liked and I enjoyed it. So there's a scene early on where after everybody's met and introduced, where he talks to Charlie and he's like talks about women. He's like, well, your girl, she's pretty, she's ripe, and your mom is too, and they have the smell, and you have to put up with that. You got to take care of it, is what he's saying, and so it's not like you don't get the feeling that he hates them, but you get the feeling that Jerry's like, yeah, you found out, so now I gotta come after you. And there's an interesting scene where he's trying to get invited into the house, on the on the pretext of having a girl come over, so he wants to get some beer, and it's this nice little exchange because he's like, okay, I'll get it for you, and he's trying everything he can to say, oh yeah, come on in, or I'll get it for you, or yeah, come on. So he's going and he's getting a six pack or whatever, and he keeps kind of like teasing, and you see where Jerry can't reach over the boundary. And I know that that's a vampire thing. It's kind of stupid when you think about it, but I liked how they did that part of it because that's the reveal where they know what's going on. And then they kind of take it to the next level, as Dalton might say, when they yeah, he explains to his family, yeah, I'm sorry, I won't have sex with you. I'm sorry I'm ignoring you, mom, and all this stuff that's going on. My friends are all missing. But yeah, he's a vampire, and they think he's, not, he's just full of it. But then Colin Farrell comes over, and they won't let him in. And so you just see him walk into the back of the house. And this is a good shot. And they're like, well, what is he doing? And he starts digging up the backyard, and I'm like, I don't know. And then as soon as he grabs the gas sign, you're like, okay, I can see where this is going. It's kind of campy that way, but he blows the house up and he's
Yeah,
like, hey, don't have to be invited in if there's no house. And then it sets off a
yeah,
really interesting scene that's kind of cool too, where they're driving down the interstate. Well, no, I won't say interstate because no other cars there, but they're in a car and they had hit him and he's following them. And there's some nice like rotoscope or 360 type shots. It looked like it's one big shot of him coming up, and then they run him over. And then of course there's a pause because somebody accidentally rear-ended them on the road. This guy comes on and is like, hey, what are you doing? And it's a cameo by the guy that played the original vampire and all that, and he gets whacked. And this sets up
yeah.
for the final act too. But no, I was surprised that there were some really good fun shots like this to watch.
There was also some touching scenes too when he tries to save the girl that Jerry was feeding on. He didn't realize when he brings her into the sunlight,
That
she's
was
kind of
kind of
dust in
funny,
his
I thought,
arms.
though. um,
It was, but out of context, yes, But I mean, like, he didn't really. Here, Charlie was never really the vampire expert. It was Ed. His friend Ed is the one that tried to warn him everything, and then Charlie started to believe him, and then like because Ed's like, because Ed's like, dude, your vampire is a neighbor, like it all points to him. Like I found out, it's like, and yeah,
mhm.
it's Charlie didn't believe him at first, then because he's like, well, dude, you're just mad because I'm hooking up with a girl, and you're like still into comic books, But like I said, the car chase with Charlie and his mom
Mhm.
and his girlfriend are driving, and here's what's his name,
Jerry.
Jerry's chasing them.
Mhm.
Is like it's that was to me that was where they started to go towards more horror. Where the beginning was kind of comedy a little more, and then they switched to horror, um, or suspense, I should say.
Yeah, and that's I always have a problems if a horror movie is a horror movie. It's not supposed to be funny, and it can be kind of ironic maybe in an adult kind of pissy sort of way. But this movie, I agree. Dalton made a comment there that this movie was fine. I just need to pick a road and embrace it. But trying to do both, it's hard for it to work. I agree with that. That being said, I did enjoy it. I think it's great. Obviously, the big scene is towards the end of the movie where they end up at where. Oh, actually, let's back up. There's the club scene because you talked about the club scene in the first movie. There's a scene where
Yeah,
they're in the club, and this is where Jerry seduces and takes his girlfriend literally and he knows that Charlie's going to follow him back to his original home, and he goes and he gets Peter Vincent, who by now Peter Vincent knows that yeah this group of kids is right, and then they actually go to defeat him, and so they go to the vampire's house, and they end up of course kind of like the original one a little bit where they're fighting and everything, but here they go in the basement, and there's a cool shot where you can see from the beginning of the movie he mentioned how he had to tear up half the basement, and you see like this big hole in the wall, and it's nothing but earth, and then all of a sudden you see like these hands start to come out because that's where all the vampires he created were sleeping at night, not necessarily in coffins but literally in the dirt in the
Uh,
wall, and it's a really cool shot, and then he
well,
go ahead.
I was just saying what was really cool about this whole entire scene, the not the subplot context, but basically everything around this. Basically, the whole town they're in is a new town. It's no, they're all brand new homes. There's no homes for miles, so it's a perfect spot for Jerry to pick up people and create his own nest.
Yeah,
So
and he's getting Jerry's taunting him. Jerry's basically like saying everything. So really, I mean, if you look at it, the thing we had talked about before was that when a woman wants you to make sweet, sweet love to her and have passionate relations, for the most part, you got to do it, or you got to kick her to the curb. It's one or the other, and you get into serious trouble when you don't satisfy that need. I mean, it's you can't go against Mother Nature. Okay, so in this here, movie, it's just kind of like that too. His girlfriend wants it, he rebuffs her. They're both drooling over the neighbor who just happens to be a vampire and the role of masculinity, and then you get to where he's getting taunted about it, but he does something finally manly that gets his girlfriend a little wet for him and not for the vampire guy. He actually there's some sunlight starting to kind of come through, and Jerry's still taunting them, and so him and Peter Vincent are kind of sitting there, and there's all these vampires around, and they're kind of looking at each other. He's got on this like ninja kind of outfit, that he went to attack the house in, but he puts on these goggles, and basically he gets lit on fire by Peter Vincent, and he crimps himself to him, and so he bursts into
yeah,
flames, and they're kind of bouncing around and everything, and they're rolling around. It's kind of silly and stupid, but it's a good visual.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and
yeah.
it's a neat way to end it. Kind of, it's a little different than the
He
original.
put he put on he put on a fire retardant suit that the stuntman's used. He got it from Peter Vincent had all his stuff. He said he was a stage show act in Vegas, so he had all the stuff he collected, all the stuff, and he didn't believe it was real. It was actually worth. But there were some cool scenes. There were some funny scenes. Um, I can understand if you just want straight up horror, that's one thing. The comedy scene was like when they were in Peter Vincent's little home or mansion over, and like and he hits him with a mace, or his girl Olga Poots
Hmm.
is Charlie's girlfriend, and she hits Ed in the face with with the giant ball, the mace.
Hmm.
Not like nah. So I thought that was kind of cool, very funny for comedy and stuff. And that's. But yeah, overall this whole entire movie is pretty much has been amped up. Like the first movie amped up to 11.
Yeah, that's kind of the rule of bigger, badder, more explosions. Put it on steroids. Most of the time, I don't think that works. And like I said, I agree with what Dalton was saying about it. Um, I wish they did pick one particular thing. And the reason why I say that is because if it was just going to be kind of schlocky and campy, and if they actually showed some boobs, like back in the '80s, that you definitely had a little TNA, a bit more to it, rather than just hints of it here, you could accept it for being that kind of schlock. But the acting was so good by Colin, and I think some of the shots were so well that I almost kind of wish they minimized it. And I don't know if there was a little bit of female empowerment in here because his girlfriend is like, I know you're a dweeb, but I like you anyway, sort of thing. I don't want these other guys like this guy or that guy. And I'm like, simply not sure. Every girl might say that, but every girl's going to bone the quarterback. I mean, that's reality. And so when they throw in a little comment like that in there, you're like, that just it's not believable, and it makes her character look stupid. But then they have her, to your point, using the mace and being involved in the fight in Peter Vincent's pretty swanky LA crib actually, where he's got all these
Yeah.
artifacts and stuff. I mean, that's kind of neat, and it makes sense for what the movie's trying to do there. So yeah, I mean, she's not horrible. She's not as grating as Amanda Bierce in the first one. So it almost makes me think if they combined a couple of the things from the old one and the new one, they'd have a killer movie on their hands. No pun intended. Brace the camp, says Dalton. So if I asked your final thoughts on this movie, whether somebody should see it or not, what would you just run off the top of your head and say?
Well, I'm also biased when it comes to Anton Yelchin, so I look for any of the he does. It's really been pretty good. Rest in peace, bro. I said that he passed away
Yep.
a couple years back. But yeah, dude, like I said, these little odd gems, like Odd Thomas, this one, what's it called, Fright Night reboot,
Hmm.
2011. Watch it, man. These, I mean, how can you pass it up? David Tennant is a good actor. Maybe I don't reason I like the guy because I watched him in Doctor Who, but he's also been in another one. I forget what it's called. It's another BBC show called Church or something.
Hmm.
It's Church Street, I think it's called. But yeah, dude, if you love movies like this, vampires, you love Colin Farrell at just being a freaking creepy you know next door neighbor, you should watch this. And
Yeah, Colin Farrell to me, this is before he did Miami Vice and I liked him in that, but he's got those kind of sad puppy eyes, and he's a handsome guy. He's not the biggest guy in the world. That being said, he's kind of like Tom Hardy. He's not necessarily the biggest guy in the world, height wise, whatever, physique wise, but they seem somewhat masculine. Because this would not work without somebody that can do that in a role, because you're trying to contrast a masculine figure versus a boy figure, if you will. So it's just, I was really surprised at how good of an actor he is, because people like to say, oh, he's just another pretty face, or he's just one of these kind of guys, or it's just his eyes, he can't act. And I remember him in that movie in 2003 where he's like a spy or something in it that was actually really good. I thought, I was like, wow, he is pretty good, and he's been in a couple things I've
uh,
liked.
yeah, he was great in American Outlaws. He was in Minority Report.
Hmm.
He was in Total Recall reboot, which kind of should have been not a reboot.
Yeah, and also he was in, I think it was the second season of True Detective, which frankly
Yes,
I
yes,
didn't think the
yeah.
writing was all that good in it. It was kind of but I liked him as a flawed character, especially the scene where he goes next door, beats the crap out of the neighbor without shoes. That was fantastic. And I'm like, man, I really appreciate some of the scenes Colin Farrell has. So to me, he really nailed it. Tony Collette's the mom. We didn't even mention her, actually. She does a great
Yes,
job
Tony.
of that, and she seems realistic in it
Yes,
too.
like I said, they had babes in this movie. Uh, the mom was hot, and so was Morgan Poots, man. Like, yeah, the neighbor, the Jerry's victim, the one that burst in the turned to ash because she got exposed in the sun.
Hmm.
Uh, like I said, they Hollywood wooded it up, but it wasn't like gaudy Hollywood to me. It could
Yeah,
have
and like
been
we
a
had
million
talked about
times
on Top 10
worse.
Tuesdays, a lot of movies are better or go higher up on your top 10 list, because there's so much crap that's out there these days. So, crap or not, this is a solid movie. It's worth it. It doesn't embrace the camp, but there's a little bit in there. There's some good lines. It's definitely watchable. Now, I was a little bit surprised when I watched it, because I thought going into it I was going to automatically hate it and thought it sucked, but I had Colin Farrell in it, so I gave it a chance. And just because of the way it started off really strong, it allowed me to kind of relax and go, okay, this might not be too bad, and it ended okay. So solid performances all around. By today's standards, this is almost as good as it gets, really. Any
And
final
the best
words?
part,
What's that?
it's not woke.
It's not. It's
It's
not at
not.
all. It's not
It's,
woke at all, and thankfully that's good. Now I'm wondering, with this movie not even being 10 years old, if they could make it today without people getting pissy about how bad it is.
oh, we saw the horrible 2013 reboot of this reboot, or they just gender flipped Jerry, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it looks like we
So
may end up doing another Fright Night, the actual sequel to the original Fright Night. I can't think it came out in '89 or so. That's a little different. It's a little campier, I believe. But we were on a Fright Night kick, and we had such a positive response to the original one, we decided to do this one tonight. So for the Doctor, for myself, for Eglantine, for My Love Comics, for Dalton, the Authenticator. Oh, Dalton, I'd like you to authenticate the awesomeness of this particular stream this evening. And I think there was an Eric Breen sighting. Yes, there is. He's got his wrench and everything. He knows The Frighteners is a decent movie with Michael J. Fox. Hopefully, if I rewatch it, I'll say it's pretty good as well, because I really like that movie a lot. And I think it was in one of our top tens
eh,
for that year, in '97, I believe it was. So, yeah.
Yes, and Jake Busey's in it as well. Another great actor. You can't go wrong with Jake Busey, man. Sorry.
All right, guys, we're going to be doing top 10 of 2012 in a little bit, so look for the notification for that. I appreciate the tweets and or the retweets and the likes and everything else there too, the bit more engagement and all that. That's really adding up a little bit here too. Again, if you guys have requests, we always keep that in consideration. The Frighteners definitely want to get up there, and I have a big special one coming up that we're going to be doing probably before Christmas time, and I'm going to keep that under wraps. But I will give you a hint. It's going to be on the extra on Kicking It, our action movie show, and it will not be a martial arts movie. So stay extreme, everybody. Toodles. It needs
Have
more
a good day.
transsexuals. Hey Bianca, good evening, good night, good listen, and we'll talk to you in a few minutes on the next stream. Good evening.